When an avoidant person and an empath both cut off contact, something happens that almost nobody talks about, and it is not what you would expect. Most people assume the empath completely falls apart. Most people assume the avoidant simply walks away, calm, easy, unaffected. But that is not what truly happens inside either one of them. What actually unfolds is something much messier, much more painful, and honestly much more fascinating than any breakup story you have ever come across. Because when these two particular types of people cut off contact, they are not just losing a relationship, they are losing the mirror they had been using to make sense of themselves. And that changes everything. Stick with me, because over the next few minutes, I am going to take you through exactly what happens to both of them, day by day, week by week, and why so many of them end up repeating the same fatal mistake that drags them straight back into the cycle. If you have ever lived through one of these relationships, or if you are living through one right now, this is going to feel uncomfortably familiar. Before we go any further, type the word mirror in the comments right now. Just that single word, it shows me you are truly here, that you are paying attention, and it helps this reach the people who really need it. And if this kind of deep emotional insight is what you are craving, subscribe to Empathy, because this is exactly what we do here. So let us start right at the beginning. Let us start at the exact moment no contact begins. Not the decision to go no contact, not the planning, not the journaling, not the talks with friends about whether this is the right move. The actual moment. The moment the last message gets sent, the last door shuts, the last phone call ends, that precise second when the silence starts. For the empath, that moment feels like falling off a cliff in slow motion. For the avoidant, that same moment feels like finally being able to breathe again. And right there, inside those two completely opposite inner experiences, lies the seed of everything that follows. Now, to really understand this, you need to understand what these two people have been doing to each other, often without even realizing it, for the whole length of the relationship. The empath is someone who feels everything intensely, not in some poetic, romantic sense, but in a very real, very draining, very overwhelming way. They pick up on emotional signals the way a radio picks up frequencies, other people's moods, other people's pain, other people's unspoken needs. They soak up all of it. And inside a relationship, this means they become incredibly tuned in to their partner. They catch the tiny facial expressions. They catch the smallest shift in tone. They sense when something feels off before their partner has even consciously noticed it themselves. With an avoidant partner, this becomes both their gift and their curse. The avoidant is someone whose nervous system was trained, usually back in childhood, to link emotional closeness with danger, not necessarily dramatic danger. Sometimes it was simply a parent who was emotionally distant. Sometimes it was growing up in a place where showing feelings brought shame or rejection or just nothing at all. No response, no acknowledgement, just quiet. And so the child learned that feelings are not safe. Closeness is not safe. Standing alone is the only thing you can truly rely on. That child grows into an adult who genuinely longs for connection but fears it just as intensely. And when an empath and an avoidant end up together, something electric and something devastating happen at exactly the same time. The empath feels like they have finally found someone worth fighting for, someone with so much hidden depth, someone clearly carrying so much pain beneath the surface. And if only they could reach them, if only they could love them enough, something beautiful would finally break open. The avoidant feels, often for the first time in years, genuinely understood. The empath's sensitivity feels amazing to them. Someone actually gets them without needing an explanation, without asking them to be vulnerable, without forcing them to do the terrifying work of opening up. The empath does that work for them, reads them, understands them, accepts them, and so the two are drawn together like two planets whose gravity was built for each other's destruction. The relationship falls into a pattern. The empath chases, the avoidant pulls away. The empath chases harder, the avoidant pulls away further. The empath reads this distance as proof that they have not loved enough, not given enough, not tried hard enough. So they give even more, bend even more, shrink even more. And the avoidant, feeling the mounting weight of all that closeness, retreats even further. This cycle repeats itself over and over, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, until eventually someone hits a wall. Sometimes it is the empath who finally burns out completely. Sometimes it is the avoidant who reaches their breaking point of overwhelm. Sometimes both happen almost at the same moment, and that is when no contact begins. And this is where things get truly interesting, because no contact is not simply the absence of talking. It is an entirely different kind of conversation, one that plays out completely inside each person's own head. And these two internal conversations, happening at the very same time on opposite ends of that silence, are almost impossible to reconcile. Let us follow the empath first. Day one of no contact for the empath is not peace. It is not relief. It is not the proud exhale of someone who finally made the right choice for themselves. Day one feels like free falling. The empath's entire system is wired to constantly scan for connection. Their nervous system has spent months, maybe years, tracking every mood swing of their avoidant partner, every text, Every silence, every small gesture, every pulling away. That tracking used up an enormous amount of their inner energy, and suddenly there is nothing left to track. The signal disappears, but the tracking system does not simply switch off, it spirals. They check their phone over and over, not because they are weak, but because their nervous system is doing exactly what it learned to do throughout this relationship. It is searching for the signal that would tell them everything is fine. They replay old conversations, not to punish themselves on purpose, but because their mind is trying to find the exact moment it all went wrong, the specific sentence, the precise turning point, so they can understand it, repair it, and stop it from ever happening again. They feel guilty, even if the relationship was painful, even if they were the one who chose to go no contact, because empaths tend to carry the weight of other people's pain as if it were their own, and the thought of their avoidant partner sitting alone in silence, maybe hurting, maybe needing them, feels almost physically impossible to bear. And underneath all of it, underneath the phone checking and the replaying and the guilt, lies something even deeper, something the empath often cannot even put into words. By week 1, a heavy identity question surfaces. If I am not taking care of this person, then who am I? Because so many empaths, especially those raised in environments where their own emotional needs came second to everyone else's, have built their entire sense of self around being needed, around being the one who understands, around being the emotional anchor inside other people's storms. Now that the storm is gone, they are left standing in the aftermath, not knowing where to place their feet. This is not weakness. This is a deeply human reaction to a deeply human wound. Now let us turn to the avoidant on day 1. Day 1 for the avoidant often feels like relief, and they will feel guilty about that relief, which they will then quickly push down, because feeling guilty means sitting with an emotion, and sitting with emotions has never been comfortable for their system. But the relief is real, the pressure has lifted. Gone is the constant undercurrent of someone needing more from them than they knew how to give. Gone is the guilt of never being able to fully meet the empath's emotional needs. Gone is the closed-in feeling of someone who saw them so clearly, who wanted so much access to what was going on inside them. All of that lifts. And for the first few days, maybe even the first week or two, the avoidant genuinely feels okay. They stay busy. This part matters. The avoidant's main coping strategy is activity, distraction, constant forward motion. They will throw themselves into work. They will exercise harder. They will call old friends. They will start a new project. They will pack every hour of every day with something that does not ask them to feel anything at all. And for a while it works. But somewhere around the 2 or 3 week mark, something starts happening that the avoidant is not ready for. The silence begins to have a texture. It is not the comfortable quiet of someone who chose solitude on purpose. It is a silence that feels hollow in a way that is hard to explain. There are moments, small and unexpected, when something happens and the avoidant's first instinct is to share it with the empath. They see something funny, they hear a certain song, they have a rough day, and for one brief second, before they catch themselves, they reach toward where that person used to be, and no one is there. And the avoidant does what the avoidant always does with feelings too large to hold. They shrink them down, they rationalize, they tell themselves they are better off. They remind themselves of every reason the relationship was not working, every reason the empath was too much, too needy, too intense, too emotionally demanding. But shrinking feelings down takes energy, and that energy starts costing more than they expected. Here is what most people overlook when they talk about avoidance going through no contact. Suppressing an emotion does not make it disappear, it just pushes it underground, and buried feelings do not stay buried forever. They rise up through the cracks in ways that are not always recognizable as grief. The avoidant might notice they are irritable for no clear reason, short-tempered at work, restless, late at night. They might notice they are drinking a bit more, working a bit too hard, filling every quiet moment with noise in a way that feels almost desperate, even to them. And if they are self-aware enough to sit still for even a moment, something most avoidants are remarkably good at avoiding, they would discover something hiding underneath all that productivity and momentum. They miss the empath. Not in some dramatic, overwhelming way at first, but in a quiet, persistent way, the way you miss something you never realized was essential until it was gone. But the avoidant does not call it missing. They will not even let themselves think that word. They call it adjusting. They call it needing some time. They call it putting their life back together, and they keep moving forward. Meanwhile, the empath is somewhere between week 2 and week 3, and something is beginning to shift for them as well. The early chaos of no contact starts settling into something else, not peace exactly, but a kind of tired stillness. And inside that stillness, something quietly remarkable starts happening. The empath begins to hear themselves again. Because when you spend months or years with your entire attention locked onto tracking someone else's emotional state, your own inner voice fades into the background. You stop noticing your own needs. You stop recognizing your own feelings as separate from the feelings you're absorbing from your partner. You turn into a tuning fork vibrating at someone else's frequency, and you completely forget what your own natural frequency even sounds like. But once the signal disappears, once the avoidant is no longer there to track, a kind of inner quiet settles in. And inside that quiet, the empath begins to hear, for the first time in a long while, the sound of their own thoughts. And what they discover there is sometimes deeply uncomfortable. Because plenty of empaths, once they get honest with themselves in this stillness, realize that what they were calling love actually held a large piece of something else entirely, something that takes real courage to name, a compulsion, a need to be needed, a fear of their own emptiness that was being papered over by the project of loving someone hard to reach. They start asking uncomfortable questions, not about the avoidant, but about themselves. Why did I stay when I was consistently unhappy? Why did I read their pulling away as a challenge to love harder instead of a sign that something was deeply mismatched? Why did my own sense of worth get so tangled up in whether I could reach them? These are not simple questions, but they are the right ones. And the fact that the empath is sitting with them by week 3 is actually a sign that something healthy is beginning to grow. Now, while the empath is digging through all of this internally, the avoidant is starting to hit an entirely different kind of wall. Around the 4 to 6 week mark, something starts happening inside the avoidant's inner world that their defenses have a harder time holding back. They begin to idealize. Human memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction. And when we are hurting, even quietly suppressed hurting, we rebuild the past through a lens that highlights what was good and softens what was hard. This is not some character flaw. It is simply how memory works under emotional strain. And so the avoidant starts remembering the empath, not as they truly were, not as the person who felt like too much, not as the relationship that felt suffocating. They start remembering the empath the way they felt at the very start, back in the early days when everything still felt new enough to feel safe, when the empath's attentiveness felt like magic instead of pressure, when being seen felt like a gift instead of an exposure. They remember a version of the empath that is, at least in part, invented, a highlight reel. And they start missing that person with an intensity that catches them off guard. This is the point where the avoidant becomes a real risk to the no-contact process, because they're idealizing, combined with their current discomfort, combined with the fact that reaching out feels far less vulnerable than sitting with their feelings, creates a powerful urge to make contact. And here is the cruel irony baked into avoidant psychology. The very same person who kept pulling away throughout the relationship, the very same person who kept signaling through distance that closeness felt like too much, is now on the edge of reaching out. Not because they have done any real inner work, not because anything has truly shifted, but because the discomfort of the absence has, for the moment, become bigger than their fear of closeness. And often they do reach out. A text, something that looks casual on the surface, something low stakes sounding, "Hey, just wanted to check in," or "I saw something that reminded me of you," or simply, "How are you doing?" And when that message lands on the empath's phone after weeks of silence, something seismic happens. Every carefully built day of the empath's healing suddenly feels shaky, because the message feels like exactly what the empath was waiting for. Even if they would not admit they were waiting, it feels like proof they were right to believe in this person all along. It feels like the breakthrough they spent months trying to create through love and patience and sacrifice. It feels like the avoidant has finally chosen them. But this is the single most dangerous moment in the entire no-contact process for both of them, because the avoidant has not actually changed. Not yet. They have simply grown uncomfortable enough to reach toward the thing that felt good. The instant contact is re-established, and some of that discomfort eases. The old patterns snap back into place with a speed and completeness that feels almost automatic. The empath will feel hope and start giving again. The avoidant will feel the pressure of closeness return and start pulling away again. And the whole cycle begins once more. Unless, and this is a very specific unless at least one of them has actually used the no-contact period to do something truly different on the inside. Let us look at what genuinely different looks like for each of them. For the empath, real inner work during no contact means starting to find the wound that made avoidant love feel so magnetic in the first place. Because here is the hard truth the empath needs to hear. The reason avoidant love felt so intoxicating was not random chance. The push and pull, the moments of warmth followed by pulling away, the love that had to be won again and again, that pattern felt familiar on a level deeper than logic. For a lot of empaths, it echoes the very first love they ever knew. The love of a parent or caregiver who was emotionally inconsistent, sometimes present and sometimes not, whose approval felt conditional, whose love had to be chased. So when the avoidant pulls close and then pulls away, some deep part of the empath recognizes the pattern and believes, below conscious thought, that if they can finally earn this person's steady love, they will heal something that has been broken inside them for a very long time. But that healing cannot come from outside of them. That is the hard and freeing truth. The empath has to learn, often for the very first time, what it actually feels like to tend to their own emotional needs, to notice what they are feeling without immediately handing that feeling over to someone else's reaction, to recognize their own worth without measuring it through whether someone else wants them. This is enormous work. It is quiet work. It is not glamorous. But it is the only work that truly changes anything. And for the avoidant, real inner work during no contact means doing the exact thing they have spent a lifetime skillfully dodging. It means sitting with discomfort long enough to feel what is hiding beneath it. It means being honest about what the withdrawal was actually protecting them from, not just in this relationship, but in every relationship, in childhood. In every moment they made themselves smaller or colder or more self-reliant because being fully present emotionally felt too risky. It means facing the question avoidants almost never allow themselves to ask, what would happen if I truly let someone in? What exactly am I afraid of underneath all this distance? Is it abandonment? Is it being swallowed up? Is it the terrifying chance of needing someone who might not stick around? These questions are hard for someone whose whole way of coping is built on not feeling things. They are nearly unbearable. But without asking them, the avoidant will keep repeating the same pattern in every relationship for the rest of their life: the pull, the closeness, the overwhelm, the retreat, the return, and around again. Now here is what tends to happen over the longer stretch of no contact when neither person does this work, which unfortunately is the most common outcome. The avoidant reaches out somewhere around the 6 to 8 week mark. The empath responds. There is a stretch of reconnecting that feels incredibly hopeful and incredibly intense. Both of them feel that original spark again. Both of them feel the relief of having the other person back. And within weeks, sometimes even days, the exact same dynamic resurfaces, because nothing fundamental has shifted in either of them. The empath starts feeling the familiar anxiety of not knowing where they stand. The avoidant starts feeling the familiar weight of closeness. The empath gives more. The avoidant pulls back. And the whole devastating, beautiful, painful cycle starts again. This can drag on for years, sometimes for decades. But here is what happens when at least one of them has genuinely done the work during no contact. And let us be honest, it usually only takes one. If the empath has truly started to understand their own wound, has truly stopped handing their sense of worth over to the avoidance reactions, something in the dynamic shifts in a fundamental way. The second contact is re-established. The empath no longer chases, not because they are playing some game, not because someone told them that holding back is a clever tactic to make the avoidant want them more, but because they genuinely no longer feel the desperate pull that used to drive the chasing in the first place. They have found enough solid ground under their own feet that they no longer need the avoidant to be that ground for them.